Not getting any better. Good evening and welcome to the Candidates Forum for Camden Select Board candidates. And thank you all for being here. Thank especially the candidates for showing up and expressing their ideas, opinions, and perspectives on issues pertinent to Camden and the region. I want to thank the town of Camden for providing this space. I'm Linda Clancy. I'm from Penn Bay Pilot, one of your local media outlets. And the town of Camden graciously offered this room. And I want to thank Renee, who's recording this. And we'll have this, it's actually streaming live. So we'll have this able for people to review before the June 11th vote. I also want to thank Molly Mulhern for coming and helping us out, and for Vicky Dudera, who's going to moderate. She graciously stepped in when Rick Rector was unable to attend. So here's how the evening's going to work. The candidates are going to have 3 minutes to just present about themselves a little bit, and then we'll dive into questions. We got a ton of questions. We are going to allow 3 minutes for each response. You don't have to fill the 3 minutes if you don't want to, because we do have a lot of questions. So we'll try to go so everybody gets a chance of starting first with each question to keep that fair. And we are taking written questions from the audience. So if you have questions, Molly or I will be, all you have to do is raise your hand and we'll come and we'll get questions, and hopefully we're going to get everything answered and posed. I will be keeping time over there. And if somebody's starting to go over 3 minutes, I'm just going to raise my hand. I mean, we're not going to lock into 3 minutes, but you guys know. Okay. So now I'm going to hand the floor to Vicky. And again, thank you for doing this. And just so you all know, I sent 4 questions to the candidates yesterday morning, I think, so that they could give some thought to these questions. And then they are going to be pretty much impromptu questions or some other ones that I have prepared, and also people have submitted via email or texting me. So again, there's no shortage of questions. Okay. Again, thanks you guys. And that's all.
Thank you, Linda. And I think we owe a lot to you, Linda, for organizing this. We appreciate it a lot, and for all your work with the Penn Bay Pilot and keeping local journalism alive, which is so important. So welcome, everybody. I'm Vicky Dudera. I'm the state representative for Camden and Rockport. Pleased to be here. And we're going to start right out with learning a little bit about these candidates and let them introduce themselves. So why don't we start on my left with Susan Dorr.
Is this on? Oh, it is. Good evening, and thank you all for turning out. I think one of the things that's great about this community is the level of engagement. So this isn't my first time in this seat. I served on this board for 2 terms back in the last century. And then coming forward, and during that time, I actually served for 2 years in the legislature. So I served 8 years in office, but I did it in 6 years. So I compressed that. And hadn't thought much about running. I've been enjoying retirement, enjoying my grandmother status. And but several people who I really respect and regard highly asked me if I would consider running for this seat. And after meeting with a number of people and just giving it a lot of thought, talking with my family, I decided that I would step forward in doing it. So I've lived here for 34 years with my husband, Greg, and we raised our son, Benjamin, here. I sold real estate for quite a few years, and then my husband and I left the country, went off and served as Peace Corps volunteers in Southern Africa. And then when we came back, I had the opportunity to, I came back into town service, served on the budget committee and on the Opera House committee. And while I was on the Opera House committee, I met Kate Bates, who she and I decided to partner and buy the business that is now Serendipity. So I did that for 10 years. And I've been retired from that since 2020. Got a master's degree in teaching English to speakers of other languages. So I've been working with New Mainers, and but most recently became a grandmother about 18 months ago. So that's it. That's it. Game changer total. So I'm thinking about legacy now, and I think that we're in a community that has remarkable assets and attributes, and changes that are afoot that we need to consider. But I think legacy is what's really on my mind, is how do we leave the best possible conditions for our up and coming generation. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Susan. Stephanie French, would you go next, please?
Hello, everybody. My name is Stephanie French. I have been in Maine since I was born. I'm a complete Mainer. I have been in Camden for 16 years, I believe it is, but I grew up right over the hill in Appleton. So before serving my 2 years on the select board, I was 3 years on the personnel board. Mr. Rector was actually my vice chair on that board for a while, and I learned a lot from him, and I've learned a lot by doing this. I am, man, there isn't much that goes on in town that I'm not a part of. I am on the Camden Rotary. So we put on the Music by the Sea on July 4th. I am part of the Camden Area Business Group, although I just recently stepped down. Turns out I can't do all of my volunteering that I want to do. I have to kind of focus on a few things. So where Camden Area Business Group used to do the 4th of July fireworks. This year, we're not able to do that, but I was a pretty big supporter of that. Connect Over Coffee for the last 5 years. I have helped maintain that. It's a local business. Every Wednesday morning, we all get together at different local businesses, talk about what's going on, what's coming up. Through that also, I am on the Christmas by the Sea committee that puts on the Christmas by the Sea, if anybody's heard of that. Part of the parade group. I also serve on the United Way Grants Committee, which is fantastic. With the Camden Rotary, I serve on their grants committee as well. So it's a lot of stuff that happens that directly involves fundraising in the community for the community and for the local businesses. So that's just who I am. And I don't have a background of owning a business, but I am a huge supporter of the local businesses, and so many of you I know personally in that realm. So that's who I am.
Thank you, Stephanie. Okay, Ken Gross.
Thanks, thanks, Vicki, and I want to say thank you to your team, Linda, and thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. I would like to take the opportunity to first of all reflect on my 20 years, which I just wrapped up at the Camden Public Library, and use that as a means to talk about what the town means to me and to tell you a little bit more about me. 20 years ago, I went to work for the Camden Public Library. I started there as the program director, bringing events and speakers and concerts to Camden. It was a perfect match for me because I was already producing such events as concerts for the Quasimodo Chorus, and I was on the team of the Rockport Folk Festival. So do any of you remember the Rockport Folk Festival? Oh, thank you. So it took me a while to realize when I started what a tremendous tool I had in the Camden Public Library. If my goal was to make Camden a better place to live, the library is a great place to start. I had a venue and a schedule and a modest budget, but most of all, I had the Camden Public Library, which already had the affection and respect of the community and the expectations of the community. That is, if there was going to be an event at the library, it was going to be worth going to. So I tried to track Camden's strengths and needs so that the programs we offered at the library could fill in the gaps. It has been a great training for visioning or envisioning what Camden could be. And I'd like to say I have seen a lot of changes in Camden. I've got enough years behind me now. I just turned 70. Remember when 70 sounded old? But now I have enough years behind me that I can throw decades around like kindling. History matters, and I had a page here on my genealogy, but I won't go there. So history matters, but change matters. Some changes are good and some not so much. I really, really miss the elm trees, but in their day, my parents really missed the chestnut trees. I miss having the high school in town, but I also remember seeing toilet paper and other stuff floating back and forth in the low tide at Lake Beach. That was before we had a sewage treatment plant. The demographics of Camden have changed a great deal. When I was a kid, the mill was the biggest employer in town, and I remember walking home up Washington Street, and the guys in the mill were hanging out the windows. I don't know how they got anything done. There was always guys hanging out the windows at the mill, and they would holler down, "Hey, kid, get a haircut." But John knew the correct response, which is, "Get a job." Camden is absolutely blessed by being full of people who have actively chosen to live here. You do pay an economic penalty to live in Maine and an extra premium to live in Camden, but all of you have made that choice and you all make Camden a better place. I'm supposed to make a pitch, so here it is. Camden is a great place, and I hope to contribute to keeping it that way, and thank you very much for your support.
Thank you, Ken. Okay, now we'll go to Sophie Romano.
On va le faire en français, comme ça on va parler la deuxième langue de l'État. Bonsoir tout le monde. Good evening. My name is Sophie Romana. I am currently serving my first term on the select board. My husband and I, we moved to Maine a few years ago after he told me on our third date that he wanted to retire here. So this is how people get to Maine when we come from New York. So for the past 7 years, it's been a real pleasure to live here and to enjoy everything that Camden has to offer. I got involved in town government because a neighbor of mine thought I would be a good candidate for the budget committee. So beware when your neighbors tell you that you would be a good candidate for the budget committee, you might end up on the select board. I run my own business. I have a consulting group that works on women's economic rights, mostly in developing economies. So I travel a lot. And every time I travel and I come back to Camden, I'm reminded what a wonderful place this is. And it's really a jewel. I'm involved with the Select Board. I've also created a network of local solo entrepreneurs so that we can help each other grow our businesses, create jobs, and create growth in Camden. I'm an officer of the yacht club because my husband and I sail and we love using the harbor and we love sailing in the Penobscot Bay. I really have been enjoying tremendously the work of the Select Board. It's a very fulfilling role. It's very dense. It's very varied because we have a lot of different topics we work on. I've been enjoying also the back and forth with Camden citizens who share with me their frustrations, their ideas, what we could do better, what we missed. And I really love this engagement. And I have to tell you that nothing makes me more sad than when I walk into the French conference room on a Tuesday night at 6:20 p.m. and I see 2 people. And I would love to see more people being engaged and have the opportunity to exchange more with the citizens of Camden. All my colleagues here have mentioned change, legacy, challenges. I could not agree more. We're facing really, really important challenges. And everything we do at the Select Board and in town government involves trade-offs. We always have to carefully weigh, if we do this, what are the consequences? If we don't do this, what are the consequences? How can we make the town better? How can we keep in mind the public good? Every time I sit here every other week, or when I sit in committees, or when I talk with town staff on issues, I always have the public interest at heart, and mostly my 2 granddaughters, because I want them to be able to enjoy whatever beautiful natural resources we have in Camden. And as Susan said, you know, legacy is really important. We're the 2 grandmothers here. Your grandmother too, so it's the grandmother board.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Sophie. I think we'll all agree, we all have some great candidates here. So now let's get to the questions and see how they answer our questions. So remember, you'll have 3 minutes for the questions. You don't have to take all the 3 minutes. We're going to be varying the order of responses. So Sophie, this time we're going to start this question with you, and you'll all get a chance to answer it. A group of Camden and Rockport residents have been advocating that the two towns convene a citizen-led committee to study how the municipalities might work together to resolve differences over the current sewer system. What is your opinion on this issue? And should the towns work together or go their separate ways with individual sewer systems?
Yes. No. So I love this question because it touches on many things that I'm really passionate about. The first one is regionalization and working together. I mean, all the towns around here, Rockport, Rockland, Lincolnville, Hope, we all face the same challenges, the same shortages of resources. And if we pool our resources together, I think we can come with better solutions to serve more people. More cooperation with Rockport, I would absolutely welcome that. Actually, I met with Denise Munger a couple of times to talk about how we could bring that collaboration together. I think the wastewater plant, wastewater treatment issue is a complicated one, like every issue we work on, not easy to solve. But again, if we pooled our resources together and imagining that, Rockport is able to raise the amount of money they're looking at to build their own, we could partner with them and maybe add capacity to Camden as well. So that if we can all work together to raise more money, have a better collaborative approach, increase capacity so that the system benefits everyone, every ratepayer in the case of the wastewater, but as well as taxpayers, because both ratepayers and taxpayers are impacted by those projects. It's one of the key infrastructure we have to invest in to keep on serving our communities. So I would absolutely welcome working with Rockport Select Board and the town and exploring joint solution to this really nasty problem.
Thank you. Ken, would you like to answer that question?
Sure, thank you. I agree with Sophie. Thank you. No, we are increasingly in a regional economy. The problems and the solutions that we face, each and every town faces the same problems and solutions. So in particular, we have a relationship with Rockport, but we could also include Rockland and Lincolnville and Hope and Appleton. Maybe not in this particular solution, but in most regional issues that we face. Expensive projects such as sewage treatment are challenges in every town. It only makes sense to investigate whether there is a cooperative approach works. In the case of the sewage treatment, I think that the technical discussion will probably guide us to a solution. Questions of capacity and cost are going to be figure-outable, and we could follow the solutions that come up in those technical discussions. The previous cooperation between Camden and Rockport should be our model. Perhaps the current billing that happens with the water company might be a model to follow, but definitely we should pool our resources and cooperate with our neighbors.
Thank you. Stephanie?
Ditto and ditto. Our communities are so tightly knit together that not collaborating, not pooling our resources on many different areas, especially wastewater, is just incomprehensible to me. We need to find out a way to do it. We have a lot of great people. Camden is unique in the people that we have that live here. We have a lot of people here that have the technical knowledge and know how to make something like that work. It doesn't need to be at the select board level that these decisions are made. I understand that we are the policy makers, but we can pull from the communities that have a lot of great resources and people that have moved here that could help move this forward if we could just figure out a way to work together and collaboratively. I 100% think that there is wide room to work together on the wastewater problem, as well as many other areas that I'm sure we'll cover tonight.
Thank you. Susan?
One of several of the articles, and then the way the question was posed from the Camden Herald was about a breakdown of communications. And I've been married for 45 years, so I know that there's no breakdown of communications that can't eventually be sorted out until the next one. But there is no reason in the world why this can't be sorted. And I think that, Camden is under, as I understand it, we've got the I&I issues with all the freshwater infiltration that needs to be sorted. It's a huge issue. And then Rockport also has some potential growth on the drawing board, which has been there for some time. So there's no telling how soon. Projects on Route 90. I'm involved with Habitat. I know Vicky's involved with Habitat. There are some developments that are in the pipeline. Whether that requires that there be greater capacity in Rockport eventually will be considered when the time comes. But in the short term, I think what's challenging is that these infrastructure issues are complicated, and they're difficult ones for us as the governing body, because we all are the governing body together, to unravel these things. And so it's really incumbent on us as leaders, or prospective leaders in my case, to communicate as well as we can to the citizenry what we feel is the best strategy forward. But we're inextricably bound together.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is switching to the climate. Ocean storms and rainfall totals have increased, causing erosion on the waterfront, infrastructure damage to roads, culverts, and bridges, and threatening public health with raw sewage from a compromised sewer system running into the harbor. What does Camden need to do to proactively address the effects of climate change on a coastal community? And Ken, this time we're going to start with you.
Sure, thank you. Sea level rise is certain. The town needs to decide which projection, that is, which sea level rise projection we are going to set as our benchmark, whether it's the 2050 sea level rise or whether it's the 2100 sea level rise. And the difference is 2 feet or who knows, 8 feet or more. The solution will be to raise the public infrastructure, that is the seawalls on the public landings, all the way around the harbor. Perhaps the town can make joint cause with the private owners, but perhaps the private property owners will be on their own. That remains to be researched. Camden needs to research whatever federal and state funds there may be to mitigate the costs of hardening our waterfront. The time frame of 2100 may make the adjustments very expensive in the near term, when perhaps the solution will be to build for the near term being 30 years as opposed to 70 years. And it may be more economical to build for a 2 or 3 level sea level rise, knowing that in the future we're going to have to add on top. So of course, what is designed and built will be ready to accept whatever the next step is. That's my Yankee sense of doing things as cheaply as possible for the short term and the long run. And I have here a copy of the RFP that the town recently put out, Jeremy Martin put together. And this seems to be right on the money and going right in the right direction. The goal is to develop a resilience plan for all public and private property in the inner harbor, and to conduct a robust community planning process with the goal of building consensus on resilience. So I think we need to keep our eye on sea level rise. When it comes to the ponds, lakes, and rivers, we have recently had not one, but 3 100-year storms. The good news is that the enormous volume of water was swiftly and efficiently drained from Maguntacook River and from Goose River. There was no overbank flooding. I hope that relieves some anxiety and relieves some of the pressure to do something in the short frame of time. There's time to assess if and what the problems may be. The bad news is, of course, there were 3 100-year storms in the last year. But in balance, let's keep our eye on the ball. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephanie?
Yeah, Ken, I think you raised a good point with the fact that Jeremy already put out an RFP on this. So Camden isn't looking at it like this. We are looking at it with our eyes wide open. We've already made a lot of ordinances about how culverts are supposed to be placed, how they can be placed, and who can do them. We have the planning department. Jeremy has already, I think he's already applied for the coastal resiliency grant, or he's going to be. I'm not really quite sure. The town has also partnered with the Camden Action Now group. So that's another way that the town has already been engaged. The town's engaging the community already, which I think is a very important part of all of this, is how to keep the town engaged in what everybody keeps hearing on the news and reading in the newspapers. And it just feels like it's such a big problem. How are we going to keep our property from the sea? And engaging the community and keeping that conversation going in a way that people want to continue to come in and speak on it and come in and talk about it again, to the point that we're sick and tired of talking about it. And then, as my pastor says, we got to talk about it again. So that's what I think. Right now, the Camden is not looking at this problem with their eyes closed. They're going at it 100%. There's a lot of different things that can be done. And I think right now we are definitely taking the steps forward to meet it head on. And I encourage everybody to stay in on that conversation.
Okay, thank you. Susan?
Thank you. I think that a lot of these issues are all of a piece and need to be addressed comprehensively. Doing a kind of a deep dive into the various plans around the river. You can't separate the different components and address them independently. They're, the frequency and intensity of storms is becoming the new normal. And so there's no way around incorporating that into the vision around wastewater management, around sea level rise, around protecting our landmark jewel properties that really make Camden the place that we love. There was an interesting article in the Times this morning that I scrolled through on my way to Wordle first thing before I got up, about insurance, homeowners insurance. And it identified states, mainly the swath of states through the center of the country, that are subject to epic storms, windstorms and tornadoes and that type of thing. And Maine was not one of the states that was in a grouping that was having this, where homeowners insurance, when it becomes no longer profitable, homeowners are dropped and insurers stop writing in states. And so, but there was an interactive aspect. And so I clicked on Maine, and the profitability of homeowners insurance had been up, and then last year dropped down to nearly no profitability. And the reality is that if homeowners insurance writers stop writing in our state, we're in a heap of trouble. And so forward thinking on these kind of global issues has got to concern every one of us, whether we're living on a waterway or whether we're directly impacted. This is bottom line for all of us. And so I'm sort of, it's got to be a concern for all of us about how we're engaging and looking at the most long-term solutions.
Thank you.
I,
Sophie.
I agree with what everybody said, but I'm a climate change optimist. And I'll tell you why. I started working in international development decades ago. And we started looking at those issues of climate change and how they affect agricultural production, livelihoods, all sorts of things, health, migration networks, etc. And the conversation has shifted from people telling us point blank, we don't believe in climate change. You don't have to believe in climate change. Whether you believe in it or not, it's happening. So that's a fact. But the conversation has shifted into the how are we preparing? And that makes me very optimistic because I think we are all on the same page when we say we need to build the resilience of Camden. And it's the resilience of the harbor, of the river, of the snowball. It's the resilience of our wastewater system. When it rains, we have those super quick downpours and Bayview is underwater. I have neighbors who have nicknamed the condos on Bayview Surfside. And it's a really sad nickname, but because they're seeing the impact that those astronomical tides, quick downpours have, and again, our aging infrastructure in which we haven't invested in the past really needs to be upgraded. But I'm optimistic because it's in every conversation. There's every big project you see the town undertaking these days is about climate change. It really is the backdrop against which we prepare everything and we think about everything. So it's serious, it's important, and I'm really pleased to see that the conversation is ongoing and that we're all looking for solution. And again, I think the support of federal grants, like Ken said very appropriately, no town like ours has a budget to undertake that infrastructure update and upgrade we need to do, but the federal government can help us. So I'm optimistic, but I think it's the priority number one, and that's the backdrop against which everything is going to be planned and designed for the next decades.
Great, thank you. Thank you all. Well, now let's head west a little bit to the Snow Bowl. The Camden Snow Bowl has yet to complete its redevelopment initiated in 2014 when Ragged Mountain was subjected to tree clearing to expand and reconfigure ski trails and install a new lift. Still, a planned new lodge has yet to be constructed and a full four-season vision yet to be crafted. So our question to you is, what do you consider the next steps should be for the Snow Bowl and the Ragged Mountain Recreation Area? And this time, Stephanie, we're starting with you.
Snow Bowl is one of my key projects that I have decided that whether I move forward with the select board or not, I'm going to engage more in. I attended the last, the Snow Bowl in the town put on a community engagement event with OSI, which is the trail people that they have asked to come in and help design the trails. I attended that. And I'll tell you what, when I walked into that room and I was met by a wall of people, I was so excited because that showed me that what I'm hearing from the town, and I am hearing some negative things, but what I'm hearing mostly from the town is they want to find a way to make the Snow Bowl work. The town voted years ago to build a new lodge. The town has voted many times in the past to do things out there. I remember stories from my father-in-law telling us how they did chicken barbecues out there. The fire department did, as well as other people from the town, to build the lodge. the old timers felt, the old timers, I'm sorry, but they felt that that piece of property was so important that that's what they put their time in. Can you imagine spending time and the small amount of money that each chicken barbecue took? I mean, that's dedication. That is the heart and soul of what our town was built from. So I think that the way that the town is going about it, engaging the community, engaging other people to come in and try to make this a four-season hill and area is the exact way to do it, and I am all for it.
Thank you. Susan?
I know that the Snow Bowl has always been a polarizing facility in town, and I am not a believer that town-owned facilities need to be profit centers. However, I appreciate that the Snow Bowl, I had a wonderful long conversation with Holly Anderson the other day, the interim director, and feel really good about her grasp on the budgeting. Several of my family members are very, very involved out there. My brother-in-law and my nephew are on the snowmaking team and absolutely love it. And they had a hell of a time this year where they made all kinds of snow only to have it wiped out by rain more than once. It was heartbreaking, but they did just tremendous work and managed to be open on time and stay open as long as they possibly could. That said, we've lost several really important venues for events, Point Lookout, High Mountain Hall. So there are opportunities for events at the Snow Bowl. But as importantly, it's such a draw to the community when you look at the numbers of people who come for the toboggan championship, and they come from all over the country, the multiplier effect into this economy of people who come for that long weekend and have a blast, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. I'm a huge fan. My son spent every day of every winter that he possibly could in his childhood out there, was safe and happy and exhausted. It was the best possible thing for a kid. I'm a supporter, and I don't want to see every activity out there monetized, but I think that there are ways that more revenue streams could be produced for sure.
Okay, thank you. All right, Sophie.
The snowball is one of those issues that I've been learning about since I got on the board 3 years ago. And for me, it's a really complicated issue because it's a little bit of a race against time. I think it has immense value for our town for all the reasons that all three colleagues mentioned, but also for kids. And I know a lot of kids get scholarships to go to good universities and colleges because, they're devil racers and they're super gifted. And so for them, it's an integral part of their education. So I really want to preserve that. I always keep in mind that Stowe today in Vermont makes more money in the summer than they do in the winter. And it's a shocking figure when you think about it. I think ultimately the question is with the voters, though, with the town. What do we want to do with the snowball? What is the expectation of the snowball? I do believe that the expectation that the snowball makes a profit is not super realistic. But that's not what we're expecting from the Opera House. And we value the Opera House for all the cultural events they put together and the festivals and all the things. So it's really a town question that we need to bring more input from the citizens, because it's going to be a difficult situation to resolve, and it's going to be costly. Even if we go for a 4-season model, that'll require an investment. So another part, Snowball, Opera House, Harbor, library. These are, for me, the four key jewels of Camden, and we need to protect them. But we also need to be very realistic about the investments that are required to continue enjoying them.
Thank you. Okay, for our next question, we're going to start with Stephanie this time. I'm sorry, Ken. When I was mixing up the orders, I thought, no, come on, who's going to be first? I'm sorry, Ken, please go ahead.
Thanks. I grew up at the Snowball, and my kids did too, and so I have a great impression of what the Snowball can mean to families in Camden. And I also have read Jack Williams' history of the Snowball, and it is remarkable on looking through the history of the Snowball since we started at about 1930s, how consistently the records report anguished laments about, oh my God, we lost money this year, and 2 years in a row we've lost money, and we're going to have to close the Snowball. And then we have a year in the black, and everybody is happy, and we move on until the next crisis. So that has happened over and over again. Many people say that the coming years will show a decline in the number of good years, but it's hard to predict such a huge variable. The question referred to 2014 and 2015, which I did not have in the top of my memory what the Ragged Mountain development was all about. So I looked into it. The Ragged Mountain development was that year where they remade all the trails, which got a bad reputation because all the mud flowed down the mountain into Hosmer Pond. But they also did accomplish a number of things. This was phase one of the Ragged Mountain redevelopment. They put in an infrastructure for a new power supply, a new septic system, a geothermal heat source, new lighting, new lifts, and new ski trails. So pretty much made the basis for what could become a four-season destination. And the distinction between the Ragged Mountain development and the Ragged Mountain Foundation, of course, was vague to me then, and I hope to clarify it for you now. The Ragged Mountain Foundation is a private group of fundraisers, and they've been very generous in providing over half of the funding to do the Ragged Mountain development. Do they still have money left in the account? Because they haven't finished. The lodge is the big goal to be done. So yes, there is less than $1 million, I understand. And they do intend to do some fundraising to go towards the new lodge. And we should probably not call it a lodge. We should call it a community center, but of course we're going to call it a lodge. It's going to be the new lodge as opposed to the old lodge, because the old lodge is not going away. The A-frame will still be there. So it'll be the new lodge and the old lodge. So in the long run, the model for managing the Snowball will need to take into account climate change. But in the meantime, we should really celebrate the incredible facility and the family supportive center we have. It's just remarkable that parents can drop the kids off in the morning on Saturday and come pick them up at the end of the day in the middle of winter. This is the most marvelous outdoor activity you can imagine. We should continue to investigate four-season use, and it seems to be, oh, is that for me?
Wrap it up, Ken.
I will just reiterate that, as I think everybody has said, that we don't expect our recreational facilities to turn a profit. Lake Beach doesn't return a profit. Barrett Cove doesn't return a profit. The Opera House, the library, we get tremendous value out of the Snowball, and it's a highly unusual attraction that Camden has that nobody else, no other small town has. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And thank you all for paying attention. See, I did a little test to see if you were all paying attention, who was supposed to go next. So Stephanie, we're not starting with you this time. We are starting with Susan. Susan is first. Here's the question. What do you think the future of EMS service in Camden should look like? Emergency medical services.
Well, it's my understanding that many of our firefighters are EMS providers now and are answering many, many calls where they're going to homes to care for someone who's in an emergent situation. and that the only thing that they are not doing is transporting to the hospital or to wherever. This is another one of those so profoundly complicated questions because of the funding streams that come in to paying for who gets transported where and when. I think I was on the board. In fact, I know I was on the board when the facility over on John Street was sold and that whole operation was disbanded, and the discussions around that at that time were just mind-boggling to me. It's not as straightforward as saying if we have an ambulance and we transport, we get reimbursed. It's all a function of how somebody's care is being provided and so on and so forth. I will say, I will go to the wall for any first responder. I think we have a level of first responders in this community that is second to none, and they will get my complete support. If it seems viable to have, and I guess it's a function also of how the staffing goes and the hours that that firemen are on the premises, and that's all to be sorted. But if the numbers work and it's viable for us to have an ambulance in Camden that is going to enable us to have even better emergency response than we have now, then I will be delighted to explore that to its fullest.
Okay, thank you. Let's go back this way this time. Stephanie, you go next.
All right, fire and EMS. This is where I have a lot of passion about. When we were thinking about how to move forward with the fire and EMS during the budget season, we were presented with a phase plan that laid out a plan. And I think that there are a lot of elements of that plan that are really good. I think that the collaboration between Camden and Rockport and Lincolnville and Hope and Rockland even is needed, and the conversation needs to be so much bigger than it is. I think that we have a really great foundation right now. Our fire and EMS department do respond to EMS calls. Do we need an ambulance here? That's a question that is kind of up in the air. From what I'm listening and talking with a lot of people in the community, they want one, but they're also wondering, well, Rockport has a ambulance and we still have Northeast, and then we have North Star, and then we have Rockland. So how can all of these areas complement each other? Again, we're in a very unique position right now to make that decision on how are we going to complement each other? How are we going to all sit down at the table and decide the future of our area, fire and EMS? Does it look like a more regionalized approach? Does each individual place set up their own department and run it on an individual basis? Is that economical? Is that responsible? Is that fiscal responsible? I'm not really sure right now because we haven't had those hard talks. And until we have those hard talks, these are just questions that everybody are going to continue to talk about on an hour by hour. I can't tell you how many hours of conversation I have had with multiple. I mean, I've talked to people when I go snowmobiling up in Presque Isle about this, because we all sit down at the table and everybody talks about, because that's the main way. So I've talked down to people in Scarborough and Saco and Augusta and the old Augusta town manager and places like that. So it's a huge conversation and it's not over with yet. So I encourage more communication on it. I think it's a great conversation that needs to be had. I think we have a really great foundation in the area, not just in Camden, not just in Rockport, not just in Rockland. I think it has to be a complementary system where everybody works together. And what that looks like is yet to be seen, but I know that we can get there if we just work together.
Okay, right at the bell. Ken?
Thanks. I'm not sure what I can add to what Stephanie just said, but that won't stop me. I don't have expertise in this field, and one of the things I've learned is that I'm going to have to do a lot of listening. But I did talk with a member of the Rockport Fire Department the other day, and it was very enlightening. They're building a new fire station out in West Rockport, you may know, but they will retain the one that's downtown. So their goal is to have a distributed service. The yardstick that he used to measure the success is response time, and he was proud that they were moving in the direction of a better response time. So as I said, I have a lot to learn. But I will also bear in mind that an EMS team and its ambulance are frightfully expensive. We're just a small town on the coast of Maine. What level of service can we afford? And that will be part of the discussion. But you mentioned all of the local towns and Northeast Health and Penn Bay. And apparently that if you're doing a transfer service, that's a bread and butter income stream. But if one service takes that income stream, it deprives all the other ambulances of some income. And I don't know what the solution is, but we do need to be discussing that. But I am impressed that the emergency services, they all talk to each other, they communicate, they back each other up. Everybody is on call and they know where the gaps are, and they're ready to step up. And I'm sure that will continue in the future. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you. Sophie?
So another super simple issue that we are all vying to solve, right? That's what we're running for Select Board. It's a super interesting issue because for me, the EMS is a typical issue that can become the platform to build more cooperation between our towns. Ken mentioned the frightfully expensive nature of those investments we need to make. And to me, it makes very little sense to do that alone as a town. I think the opportunity for us is really to work with Rockport, Rockland, to continue have mutual assistance agreement, to even deepen those mutual assistance agreements with other towns like Hope and Lincolnville, for instance. But I also think that working with the county and the responsibility of the county to help us shape the future of the EMS services is important here. And it's a player that I would really love to bring to the table because that will also help us foster more cooperation. There are two statements that two gentlemen from Camden made recently about the fire department EMS. The first one is two young high school students who are volunteering with the fire department right now. And during one of the workshops we had with the Select Board, they told us, if I cannot become a medic, I won't have a career as a firefighter. So the linkages between being able to provide medical services as first responder and having a career in firefighting is really, really strong. And we won't be able to attract talented firefighters and EMS technicians if we can't combine these. It's very clear in my mind that there is no other way. The second one, it's John, you said that at one of our Select Board meetings, and it stuck with me. When you volunteer for the firefighting department, there was a wait list of 50 volunteers. It is no longer the case today. We can no longer rely on volunteers, and I thank them for their service because they're doing an amazing work. But we really need to professionalize that activity, or else we won't be able to deliver on the expectations which are increasing every day of our population in terms of rapid response and making sure that we have 24-hour services, that the calls don't get unanswered in the middle of the night. It's not the case right now. But I think the expectations of the citizen in terms of service have to be taken into account, and the fact that if the volunteers cannot have a viable career as emergency service technicians, EMT, paramedics, et cetera, and firefighter, we will have a hard time staffing those fire departments here in Rockport, in Rockland, anywhere. So it's a good opportunity for regionalization and a complex task, but I'm hopeful that we can find a solution.
Thank you. You guys are doing great. Aren't they doing great? And you guys are being good listeners. Yeah, thank you. So far, so good. Our next question's got a little bit of a long lead in, so bear with me for a minute. The Magunacuk River Watershed Project has been underway as a committee-led endeavor. According to the project's mission, the committee's purpose is to provide recommendations to the Select Board for preserving and improving sustainability and resiliency of the Magunacuk River and its watershed. These recommendations will be supported through engagement with the community, stakeholders, grant funding agencies, and providing a due diligence process to advance viable options. The committee met May 8th, and they looked at some potential designs. So here's the question. How do you think the process is coming along, and are you partial to any design scenario for the future of the river and its outlet to Camden Harbor? And Sophie, you're first.
I'm partial to the process because I have the privilege of chairing this committee. It's been a fantastic adventure working with 9 people who are super committed to exploring every issue around managing a river and having a healthy river system. And I really want to take a second to thank them because they're true to their motto, leave no stone unturned, and they really are digging deep into hard conversations and hard issues. I think the process is interesting and is facing the lack of public comments and the lack of community engagement. And I can tell you that every month when the River Committee meets, we always talk about how can we hear from the people we haven't heard before. We are very curious to hear from everyone in town, people who support changing the removing dams, keeping dams, building fish ladders, not building fish ladders, modifying Harbor Park. There's so many options. So I'm taking advantage of this pulpit to say, we really want to hear from you. Please let us know what you think. And we're going to organize more events where the community will be invited to participate and share with us. My personal preference is I do think that the river right now is not as its healthiest as it could. I think we need to be better steward of this magnificent asset. I do believe that some of the dams who had a useful and were useful because they were linked to the mills or to any other industrialization processes no longer fulfill that role. And so why would we keep them if they're not making our river healthier and more enjoyable? So I am completely open to exploring multiple designs, multiple ideas, whether we remove all the dams, we partially remove dams, whether we build fish ladders, not build fish ladders. But for me, what's important is that we make the river more resilient, we increase the wildlife along the river and the enjoyment of the river. And by this, I mean, having a river walk, making sure one of the designs I would support, for instance, at the Montgomery Dam, is having bridges so we could hop from the public landing to the island to Harbor Park and walk around the entire harbor. I think this project is a great opportunity for us to increase the natural beauty of our harbor and making our river more resilient and a thriving ecosystem. I'm going to stop here.
Okay, thank you very much. Ken, you want to take a stab at that one?
Sure, thank you. I have been to several of the MRCAC, the Magunacuk River Citizens Advisory Committee. That's what the Mr. CAC or MRCAC stands for.
MRCAC.
Yes, MRCAC. And I've been very much impressed by the energy and enthusiasm and the intelligence and dedication of those folks. They've put in many, many hours of meetings. They've been at it for 1.5 years, and it sounds like I was eager for them to start having public values assessments early on. But at the last meeting, they said they are scheduling them for perhaps later on. this very month. Um, As you may know, I have paid a lot of attention to the Montgomery Dam, which is only one dam out of 6 or 7 on the river. There's something special about the Montgomery Dam. It is fulfilling the purpose for which it was built and designed. It was built and designed to be the centerpiece of the view shed in Harbor Park and at the head of the harbor. And it is still fulfilling that function. And as you can tell from what I just said, I would favor preserving Montgomery Dam. And from the beginning, people like Mike Burke, who wrote the Interfluve reports, has said that yes, it is possible to build fish ladders, and so the twin goals of preservation of Montgomery Dam and fish ladders is a possibility. Anyway, I look forward to the discussion. From my point of view, if the Montgomery Dam is preserved, then the discussion about the value of fish ladders can and should proceed. So I'm looking for, and I hope you all do come out to the assessments and the public sessions that MRCAC has. Thank you.
Thank you, Steph.
So I have actually firsthand talked to a lot of the different river dwellers, and I have access to them on a pretty regular basis. And the concerns that I'm hearing is that during this process, they were told that they were going to be able to or be reached, have an outreach to them to give their opinions on the dam. And the ones that I have spoken to have not had that opportunity yet. So I do worry that right now with the last meeting coming up with designs before they have talked to people that would be directly impacted by the water levels on the river, that concerns me. As far as my viewpoint of the committee, they have definitely proven that fish are important, wildlife is important, and rivers are important. So I am looking and searching and waiting for the next stage where the community involvement is very important to have. So if we do have the public outreach meetings, I would encourage that everybody goes out to that, because it sounds that that is going to be where you are going to be asked for your opinion. And I think that that is a common theme of what I feel the town needs to do more of: public outreach, getting the opinions. When we say that we're going to get the opinions of people that are directly involved, that we search them out and we make an intentional effort to get their opinions of what we're saying we're going to do. So that is how I feel about that portion of it. As far as the Montgomery Dam, I have a big affinity to keep that dam and have working results around that for the fish ladders or things like that. But then again, I need to know more information, because can we afford to have the fish ladder? Is it fiscal responsible to put millions of dollars into building one? What is that going to look like in the long term? So there's just so much more information that I need right now on that, and I just haven't been given. So again, I look forward to having a lot more conversation. And I think that the point in the committee right now, I think they're going to have to do that deep dive into these final processes. And I think it's going to answer a lot of questions that people have that has been leading up to it. It's kind of like we're at the point where a lot of the hard conversations are going to be had, and people need to start paying attention really, really hard.
Okay, thank you. Susan?
So where do I start? I think if we're ever to think comprehensively about legacy, this is the issue because of how many elements of our long-term viability as a community and the health of our environment are woven together into this very complicated question. I think that it is incumbent upon leaders on all sides of this question to make the cost, to spell out the cost scenarios. It's my understanding that there are, that certain scenarios will fall entirely on the taxpayers to handle, whereas others carry significant grant opportunities with very little participation from the town, if any. We were just, my friend Stephanie just brought up the fact that Camden is one of the only towns in Knox County that's had a net growth in population. And we've had families, and our children care about these things. This is why we're here. So to be attached to an aesthetic is a great thing. I mean, we love things that are old and beautiful and that identify our community. But I think given opportunities for real broad, just a broader look at how to address this, the watershed that we live in and its health and future, is a lot bigger than our aesthetic attachment to one piece or another in the community of a built structure. That said, I'll just go back to saying I would love to see, because I've been doing, digging into this in preparation for being here with y'all, and I want to see it side by side. If we take this strategy, this is how it's going to get paid for. And if we take this strategy, because for many folks living here, that's the bottom line, is where is it going to hit my tax bill? And so the responsibility really is there to make that crystal clear.
Okay. Yes. Yes, you may.
So many great questions from the audience. I'm wondering.
Okay, don't get too relaxed. We're ready to start. We're going to do a couple of a little bit more personal questions. And I think, Ken, it's your turn to go first. Am I right? Sophie, you went first last time. I was first. Yeah, I was first. You were first. Okay, so Ken, you're first on this one. How do you approach making decisions on important issues that you have no interest, background, or understanding of? And I wonder if you're going to answer the library. I'm just wondering. 2 minutes.
What was the question again? How do I make decisions?
How do you
on-
approach making decisions on important issues that you may have no interest, background, or understanding of?
I don't know how do I put the question. Thank you. I basically would fill in the gaps in my knowledge. I love to read. I love to research. I love history, and so doing the research hopefully would lead to a path forward. That was under 2 minutes, right?
Great, thank you. I knew you'd get research in the library in there. Stephanie, how about you? You've had probably a few of these in your career on the select
Okay,
board.
guys, remember those old timers I talked about? I'm going to talk about them again. So I have a unique position to be in front of a lot of different types of groups. from the young and the old. And I value each level of them so much. And so the question is quite unique on topics that you don't have any interest in. Well, if it pertains to my town, even if I don't like it, I still have an interest in it. If I don't have knowledge on it, let me tell you, it's been a heck of a 2 years learning about things that I've only slightly thought about. And it's not very hard to go out there and find the right person to get that information from. And on the flip side, it's also not very hard to go to the other side and get the positive and the negative. We have a really great group of people here, and they're all willing to tell you if they're for something or if they're against it.
Susan, what about you? And issues that you have no interest, background, or knowledge of?
Well, I think that curiosity is probably one of my strong suits, and most things can have something about them that are interesting. And I appreciate expertise and virtuosity presented by people, even if it's something that I don't know anything about. So if something's presented to me in a way that is well-rounded and has a foundation, I'm in. And I think most importantly, listening respectfully with genuine interest, and then, not jumping to a conclusion before I feel like I've got enough information.
Thank you. Sophie?
I call Ken. Because he does all the research. No, I think, first of all, every topic is interesting. I agree with Stephanie. If it matters to the town, if it's something that pertains to the town, I'm interested. I've always been interested in relationship between citizens and administrations and towns and public government. So I do relish, the idea of digging deep into issues I know nothing about. I knew nothing about the issue of the river before I moved to Camden, or even before I joined the river committee. So I will research, I will document myself, I will ask people around, I will read, and I will not stop at the first answer. I will keep on digging until I get to the root cause. That's what I like doing. That's what I do for work. So I apply the same evidence-based research and knowledge gathering for issues at the town than I do with my work.
Hey, thank you. I should have said that the questions we're talking about now, these are citizen questions, the ones that question. And here's another one, and we're starting this time with Stephanie. What do you understand to be the job of the select board? What is your understanding of that?
My understanding and the position that I have done for the last 2 years, can you read that one more time?
Sure. What do you understand to be the job of a select board?
The job of the select board. The job of the select board is to make the policies for the town going forward. So that certainly does entail taking each item that is brought before us and bringing items forward that will bring positive change to the town, whether people agree with it and whether they don't. Sometimes I even have to make decisions that I personally wouldn't make if I was just going to go off of what I actually feel. Those things happen actually all the time, that for the greater good, I will agree to make decisions because I know that, or I feel like going forward that these items will be for the greater good of the people. Bringing important information to be decided to the town is probably one of the most important things that I could do, because it can't just come from internal of these walls. It has to come from the outside of these walls. So that community engagement, again, is very important to me to bring in different things that the people inside these walls may not bring up.
Susan?
Having served on this board for 2 terms, I know that this is a deliberative body, so things are questions are brought forth from the community for us to discuss openly and respectfully, and with an emphasis on respectfully. I think that in too many communities, that process has broken down and become divisive and definitely not neighborly. And so I believe that it's our responsibility to research, to be respectful, to be civil with one another. And when there are items that, again, that we as a legislative body need to vote on, it's up to us to craft language and craft the structure so that it's clear. But I believe that transparency and discussion of the matters that come before us, because all kinds of things come before this board. So we're a responsive entity that's fielding the concerns of the community and finding the most constructive way for the citizenry to understand what's going on in the community to the extent that we're involved.
Thank you. Sophie?
Yeah, we have several functions. We do make policy, we do deliberate, and sometimes we enforce ordinances and we make sure that the law is respected. We also have an executive function. So it's a complicated role because in one evening we can be wearing many different hats. We approve liquor licenses and all kinds of licensing. So for me, it took me a while to understand how it works because I come from a country that does not know the town meeting form of government. In France, we only have municipal councils. So I had to reset my gears and my frame of reference to work as a select board member. But I think it's really interesting because we also represent the public interest. It's our role to be the voice of the public interest. And to me, that's the driving force every time I sit here. So it's a complicated job. It's very fulfilling. It's very intriguing. And it's also very limited in the number of decisions we have to make and the decision power we have. Most of the power is with the citizens, is at the ballot box.
Thank you. Ken?
Yeah, thanks. So the select board job is to look after 2 wings of what is going on in town, the nuts and bolts. They really are responsible for the nuts and bolts and looking after the budget. And that takes a lot of attention. And the first part of every select board meeting is filled up with permits and licenses and the consent items. And that's looking after the nuts and bolts, and the budget is as well. But then there's the policy issues, which is a different part of your brain, I guess, looking out for the larger issues and the larger time frame, looking down the road, 5, 10, or 20 years. It's a fascinating mix. I used to say that it was the nuts and bolts is what the select board is supposed to look after, but I see more and more that policy decisions, not national policy decisions, but themes and policies that make a difference to the people of Camden are also the purview. And it's the job of the select board not only to lead the citizens of Camden, but to follow the citizens of Camden. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all for that. Well, now we've got some questions from the audience right here. So the first one is, how do you feel about question 11 on the warrant concerning keeping the tannery property for community purposes and a park? And Susan, we're starting with you.
I, several years ago, there was an exercise in town to look at uses of the park, and there was some consideration of using a number of people came forward with design ideas. And there was the possibility of creating some mixed use. And nobody seemed to present an idea that people were really happy with. So, and I think that was a bit of a missed opportunity given housing challenges that we're facing and so on. That said, it seems that the community feels very strongly about maintaining that space for the farmers market. I was on the board when we created that deeded right-of-way for the path. We encumbered that property with that, with the right-of-way for the Riverwalk, and I think that that's a tremendous asset. I use it all the time, walking my dogs down there. So it seems that this idea has come out of the community, and to the extent that it represents the wishes of a majority of people, I'm happy with it. I might have liked to see it go otherwise, but I think that ship has sailed, and so I'm okay with it.
Thank you. Let's go back this way. Stephanie, you go next.
So the Tannery Park has been a town, what should we say, sore spot for about 30, 40 years now. And I am really excited to have this question on the ballot. I very much wanted to make it more of a concrete, let's deem it a park. But the fact that it's on there at all to decide and hear from the people, if you want to keep it a community space, that's good with me too. I think it's a movement in the right direction. I do like to have concrete answers when I do things. So I do think that we are one vote away from having a concrete answer to this parcel of land. A few years ago, I had a completely different point of view. I try to be very fiscal responsible for everything that comes before me. Not having that piece of land on the tax roll to me was just mind-boggling. But different opinions and a couple years of having discussions has kind of swayed my mind. So whichever way the vote goes, I am definitely on board for.
Thank you. Ken?
I have followed the tannery issues for years, and I've watched people work very hard and to frustrating degrees, promoting one idea or another. So the town has honestly tried very hard to, first of all, make it a commercial property. That didn't work. We've tried to make it low-cost housing, and that didn't fly either. So maybe it is time just to admit that it has value to the town as community property, and the neighborhoods around Tannery Park, I think, are clearly in support of making it a public space. So I'm glad to see it on the ballot, and hopefully a decision gets made and activities can move forward. So I'll be voting for it.
Okay, thank you very much. Sophie?
My answer is exactly the same as Susan's. I mean, I think, it's to me, it's a missed opportunity to create affordable housing, workforce housing, whatever we want to call it, and mixed use. But, the community seems to be adamant that they want a park. So the ship has sailed.
Okay, thank you. I think we're gonna mix it up, and we're gonna do a 1-minute answer to this question right here. So everybody gets 1 minute to answer this. Sophie, we're gonna start with you. If you're elected, what would you like most to accomplish in the next 3 years?
Oh, I really want to see the river project coming through. I think the opportunity we have with the current grant funding and it's a once in a lifetime opportunity to really tackle something that requires our attention. that was on top of my list. Absolutely. And,
Okay.
we're in a great situation to do something absolutely wonderful.
Thank you. Great. Ken, quick answer to that question. If you're elected, what would you like most to accomplish in the next 3 years?
I'd like to at least look into the idea of restoring some of the democratic forms in town. I was disappointed that we don't have a town meeting. I used to really enjoy going to the town meeting. I understand the pros and cons of voting and access, but I think that we're missing something in not having a town meeting. We seem to have eliminated the line item budget vote, which cuts down on your ability to have a difference per vote. And we seem to have curtailed the committee structure. I'd like to see a resurrection or a rebuilding or a re-encouragement of the committees in Camden. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephanie?
I would say when you first said that, I needed a couple of minutes because there's so many different things that we could tackle in the next 3 years. But first and foremost, I think that we need to tackle this fire and EMS. How are we going to move forward? What is it going to look like to complement services? I think that should be number one on our list. That is life safety. That is humans' lives at risk. How are we going to move that forward? What is that going to look like? Who's going to be the leaders in that? I think that is number one on my list. How are we going to tackle this fire and EMS? If it's not a problem, we need to know that as well. If we're good with where we're at, then that's fine. But this conversation has been going on for a couple of years now, so I think that there's merit to it and we need to dive into it.
Okay, thank you. Susan?
I'm going to echo Sophie that the timing with the river, if we are to pursue, there are some funding streams that may not be available to us indefinitely. And so bringing that to resolution, I think, would be top of mind for me. And I appreciate Ken bringing that back up about the town meeting. I think there is something that we've lost in our engagement by not having that gathering. It got smaller and smaller, but I remember some really extraordinary moments where the course of history changed because people were allowed to get up and speak about particular items. And it's really kind of, Jeffersonian democracy at its core best. And if we've got it, we might as well use it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for your answers on that. Ken, you brought up the committees. I'm going to start this question with you. What's your position on increasing the number of committees to get more people involved in town government, specifically the Personnel Committee?
I've said it already that the committees need to be re-encouraged. The committees, it's a feeder structure into the democracy in Camden. You can work on a project that you're passionate about and make a difference to town without having to run for select board, for instance. You can go and meet with like-minded people for a period of time and then make a difference by sending an idea to the select board and having it take from there. Personnel is not the most sexy committee. I'm not sure I would start with that one. As I understand it, the Energy Committee is not meeting, but they had some really solid things to suggest and recommend to town and had some good solid results from. So thank you. I'll pass it on.
Great. Susan, why don't you go next on that one?
I'm not a fan of committees for their own sake. I mean, people are welcome to spend time going to meetings. I was trying to avoid that for the rest of my life, but here I am. That said, I think that that personnel, I don't know, I'm not up on how the personnel process works in Camden. I do know that the end result is something that I think we can all be quite proud of because we have remarkable people who work for this town. So to the extent that is a functional aspect of our government currently, And if it needs to be enhanced, then by all means, but I'm going to leave it there.
Okay, thank you. Sophie?
So I think we cannot confuse committees with citizen participation, and we're having a hard time recruiting for committees, and I think it's because we ask a lot of people who sit on committees. So I'm a little bit like Susan. I'm not an advocate of committees for the sake of committees. I'm an advocate for using the immense talent we have in Camden very purposefully. And I would rather have task force or working groups that come in, help us solve an issue that is really big and hairy and difficult, rather than have committees that after a while are like, well, what is our purpose? What is our role? Why are we meeting? Because that's how we exhaust goodwill and talent, frankly. So I would much prefer rapid force working groups like the parking advisory group has been wonderful to work with than committees just for the sake of having committees, because I really want people who participate to feel valued and recognized. And I don't think that we're at that right now.
Okay, thank you. Let's switch to the housing crisis. Oh, Stephanie. Okay, sorry. Stephanie, please give us your opinion on that question on committees.
I share a slightly different viewpoint about committees. I feel like the committees that we have in town could be better utilized. I think we could advertise better. We can communicate better when we need people on the committees. We have multiple different, does anybody here know how many spaces we have open on the Harbor Committee right now? Right. So we only had one person that knows that. We as the select board have not done a good job communicating that. I'm sure there's other committees that I don't know that there are spots available for. That's on us. That's not on the citizens. If you don't know that there's spots available, how are you going to volunteer? When I've gone out and asked, I got 2 different applications this week by a sleight of hand comment. I also think that committees are appointed by the select board, and that means that when we give that committee a task, they aren't handpicked, such as the work groups. I do fear that picking people to be on a workforce could lead to certain people being brought in because they share common opinions, and I think a wide variety of opinions is needed. And I will pick on the parking committee. The last parking committee, there was one non-town employee on that committee that put forth suggestions, and that to me just feels a little weird. It started out differently than that, but it ended up that the rules that we have right now, we only had one non-town employee that contributed to those parking rules. I think that we need to have a better communication about that, and we need to have our committees, and we need to utilize them better. And I think that we haven't taken advantage of that fully, and I think we need to push that before we go on to a change of a model.
Okay, thank you. Let's start with you on this next question about housing. Is there a regional solution to the affordable housing crisis, do you think?
So the Camden Rotary actually has a number of our members that put together a Mid-Coast Affordable Housing Group or task force. I'm not involved with that so much, except that we did fund getting this going because it is such an important topic in this area. I know that Governor Mills is put money forth to build housing around, and I think that's honestly our best bet at this point. Yes, it's going to cost money, but I think that the federal government, the county needs to be looking at it. It can't just come from the towns. We have spaces available that could. We have up on Sagadahoc, thank you. And those spaces are underutilized. Those spaces are there. We can use those. All we need is the funding. And clearly the funding is out there. We just need people to advocate. How are we going to bring that how are we going to bring that funding in to utilize our spaces? Because we do have them. The current housing that we have right now, I don't know that we can bring it available and have it affordable for people like me that makes a meagerly wage to be able to come and live here and move here if I had even a family of 3 kids. So I think that it's a huge problem and people are looking at it. It's just, it is going to take time.
Thank you. Ken, why don't you go next on that one?
Thanks. There was an interesting question in that you asked if there is a regional solution to affordable housing, because I would concede that there is not a local solution to affordable housing. Of housing in Camden is just so extremely expensive. I don't see how to turn the corner. Affordable housing probably means some subsidizing in some fashion. And so who's going to do the subsidizing? Is it the town of Camden? Is it the school system? But going regionally seems to be where the solutions and the funding will be. County level, I don't know, but state and federal may be the way to go. And I don't know what the question implies. Do you mean regional housing? The regional housing solution will mean going outside the boundaries of Camden, or does that mean trying to find housing inside the boundaries of Camden? More questions than answers.
Yeah, it's complicated. Sophie?
I think, yeah, there is funding. I think housing, number one, every time we talk about affordable housing, workforce housing, subsidized housing, people, it's a bad name. The reaction is almost a knee-jerk reaction when I engage in those conversations with citizens. And I do believe that there are solutions, there is funding, but I think the biggest hurdle is understanding that we need that type of, let's call it workforce housing within our community so we can house firefighters, teachers, store clerks, seasonal workers, and that it will increase the value of our town, not decrease it. And I think there's a perception here that workforce housing is bad. It's a bad investment. And we really need to turn the tables on this and bring everybody together to build a more welcoming community, because we need that type of housing. But I don't know the regional plan, sorry, just.
Okay, thank you. Susan?
When I served on this board at the turn of the century,
Millennium.
there was the Camden Affordable Housing Organization, and I was liaison to that group for most of my time on the board. And during that time, several philanthropic members of the community donated land and or labor and materials to create several neighborhoods. I think that I like to think of it as attainable real estate, attainable housing. Economic diversity is what maintains vibrancy in our community. And I think that it is now we see that it's going to fall mainly on nonprofits, as does most of the heavy lifting in our society. Nonprofits step up and do really the hard work, whether it's Habitat or the new Homeworthy, organizations that really understand the question and are networking in order to grab opportunities to use a piece of land and pull together resources using a model that's been proven within Camden itself. It would take a nonprofit or a philanthropic developer, because we're looking at most building is $400 a square foot to build a house. So that's just beyond the scope. So it really is a multi-layered approach that requires a great deal of philanthropic effort, whether it's from corporate, nonprofits, builders, et cetera, stepping up to meet that need.
Thank you. And I got you all on that question, right? Okay, we have 2 more questions we're going to do. And one is a thought experiment. Okay, so here comes a thought experiment. It has been said that Mary Curtis Bach wanted buildings removed from the harbor side of Main Street in order to create a view. If a vote were to come before the select board to pursue removal of any buildings in one of our historic districts, how would you vote and why? Whether for a view, fish passage, or whatever the reason. So a little thought experiment from our audience. And who are we going to start with this time? Stephanie?
I'm going to be the quickest answer. I would not support that at all. At all. Read that as you will. I would not support that at all.
Okay. Susan, you go next on that one.
Thanks, Vicki. It's like trying to pick your favorite child. We're not supposed to do that. I mean, I think that some of this will come, the realities of it will come when the DOT Route 1 reconstruction process gets underway. So there may be some, I'm not going to pick who my favorite child is, but I think that the question will be answered when that project gets underway and there are some realities of what is existing and the conditions that it's in and what the future of some of those buildings might be.
Thank you. I realize this is a tough one, but thank you. Ken, why don't you go?
Thanks. I would come down on respecting the private property. I don't see a path forward for the town of Camden deciding to take down buildings over the river. Is that what you're suggesting? Anyway, and putting words in the mouths of people who have passed on, I find that a little awkward as well. Anyway, I would not favor the idea of using eminent domain to close down private businesses and tear down their buildings.
Okay, thank you. Sophie?
That's a super interesting question. Number one, why would we remove them? What would be the advantage we gain? What's to benefit? How would the community benefit? Number two, I was told that Mary Curtis Bach was keen on rebuilding buildings that had been damaged or needed rebuilding to make them better and more resilient. So I think she has, and I of course I never met her, but it seems to me that her spirit was very forward-looking and progressive. So I'm really curious about that. Number three, it's a conversation I just had with my husband yesterday. It's not because we remove a historical artifact that we destroy its history. And so buildings that matter to us, their stories can live with us and can be told. They don't need to exist in the community as a physical object. So I think Camden values history, and there are many different ways where we can remember history, remind it and honor it. And it's not necessarily by the manifestation of a physical building or artifact. So I would explore it. I would not vote it right down, but I would explore it.
Okay, thank you. So we're actually going to do 2 more questions, and here's the next to the last one. In 2018, Camden signed onto the Global Covenant of Mayors, the mission of which is accelerate ambitious, measurable climate and energy initiatives that lead to a low emission and climate resilient future. So our question for you is, how do you feel that we have lived up to that? And do you have ideas and suggestions for how you will push Camden to live up to it? And who are we going to start with this time? I think, Susan, we have to start with you this time.
Just got to do it sometimes. I would say I am not qualified to answer on the basis of the specifics of what Camden has done. I know that there was a lot of work being undertaken with the retrofitting of this building that were, some very critical systems modifications that were made here, because this building was a nightmare. And when Roberta Smith was our town manager, she tackled a lot of that, and that has come forward. What's the question? No. Oh, but again, I think that going back to the watershed issue and the addressing how we are responding and building resilience around climate issues is right in our headlights. We've got to be looking at this with all the decisions that we make.
Thank you. Sophie?
Sure. So I think we're making efforts towards it. So for instance, whenever the town has to acquire a new vehicle, we look at electric vehicles. It's now, the fire chief has a new electric vehicle. We're going to replace one of the pumping boat in the harbor, and one of the question was, can we have an electric pumping boat? It turns out we can't. The technology is not there yet. So I think it's coming more and more often in the decision-making processes of the select board. We do have trade-offs. Snowmaking at the Snowball is one of the biggest one. It's a massive greenhouse gas emitter, yet we want to be able to make snow because we want to be able to enjoy the Snowball. So it's one of those, this is a long track. I think the political will is there. I think people are more and more concerned about electrification, about reducing those emissions. Paid parking helps reducing emission because you have cars who don't need to make more loops at a low speed, which is very bad for the environment. So there are all kinds of things that we're starting to think about. So I think it's becoming more common in our thought process and then decision-making processes. We don't actually have any key performance indicators in that domain, that we don't track how well we're doing, but I think we should. I think it's a really good suggestion. So we're on our way. We're not there yet, but we still have a long way to go.
Thank you. Ken, can you answer that question, please?
Yes, thanks. It's the question, I think, referred to more how we're moving towards contributing to a solution to climate change rather than in mitigating the problems associated with not reacting to rainfall, but trying to cut down on our energy use. So I'm focusing on the answer as an energy question. And I think we're really done well in tackling the low-hanging fruit. We have a solar farm. We had a multi-million-dollar Siemens project, which part of it was explicitly to decrease our energy consumption here in town. And as Sophie mentioned, we have EV vehicles, but we have LED lights, the street lights in town. We've transitioned from the sodium vapor, whatever they were, to LED. So I think we have moved in the right direction. I'm not sure, maybe we have already plucked all of the low-hanging fruit, but I think we're on the right track.
Thank you. Stephanie?
I would agree with everything that has been said here. I would add, though, that because we only have 2 minutes, I can't reiterate what they're saying. So I do find it really interesting that we are pushing electric vehicles, but we do not have public charging stations. That, to me, is just mind-boggling that hasn't been a natural first step to purchasing. And I know that we have some available for municipal use, but if we are going to be a leader in this, and it kind of feels like we want to be, we need to start looking at where will these live? Will it be a town-owned thing, or would we encourage a local business to support that? That I think is definitely one of the next steps that we should look into and promote.
Good point. Okay, then this is our last question for the evening. And if you are an incumbent now, tell us a project that you've done. If you're not in office now, or maybe you were previously, you can also tell us a project that you would like to do. So the question, and again, this is from our audience, how have you worked with the town manager to improve something in town? Stephanie, you go first.
That's a really interesting question because I was on the personnel board. So I had a hand in rewriting the entire personnel policy. I was the chair of that board, I believe, for 2 years. So I worked pretty hand in hand with the group to rewrite the personnel board, and then had the privilege of then looking at again at the select board level and making it a policy. So I really got to see it through. That was a pretty big undertaking, and people before me also looked at that policy and started it. So I picked it up in the middle. Worked with the group. I do have a bachelor's in public administration, so it was right in my wheelhouse, and it was really interesting to dive into something that I went to school for and actually got to use my degree.
Thank you. Sophie, what about you?
It would have to be the river project. I worked with Audra to craft the RFP that led to hiring Forest Bell Environment, which is the consultant that's helping us create more public engagement. And I worked on setting up the bylaws and the guidelines for the committee and chairing it. It would be the biggest one I've worked on. I've also worked with her in the parking advisory group to work on paid parking and try to think through the pilot project and how it's going to benefit the town, in particular by simply replacing taxpayers' investment with rate users and parking users. So these would be the biggest two.
Okay, thank you. So for our non-incumbents, perhaps you've worked with the town manager anyway on something, or if you haven't, maybe you want to say something that you'd like to work with her on. So why don't you go ahead and answer that, Susan?
Well, the two things from my time in office in Camden that I was, that left the most mark on the landscape, I guess, were the path along the river, and because we were really grappling with the tannery property at that time and addressing the deposits of toxic material in the soil there, but being able to define that for the community was really very rewarding. And then the other thing, which I was telling some friends earlier, that I served in the legislature, and it's hard to remember things from the legislature, like not like specific bills. I'm thinking, how did that impact my community directly? But one thing that we did do when I was on this board in the past was we created all those 15-minute spaces in front of the post office. And every time I see them, I'm so thrilled because they really have made it easier to work and live in this town, to be able to pop in and have a 15-minute space that's usually open to do business.
Thank you for that. Ken, how about you?
Thanks. I not thinking of a large project, but perhaps to tell you how I would go about approaching a project. At the most recent select board meeting, they floated the idea of food trucks on the public landing, and people seem to be sort of favoring the idea. It will have more discussion, but I would throw into the mix that Camden has a parking problem, and this would take up 8 parking places on the public landing. So we've got to balance one goal against another. And also traffic, increasing traffic down Commercial Avenue doesn't seem to me a terribly good idea. We have businesses in town that already sell food, and they are already paying property taxes and whatever fees they pay. And so to bring in competition to our existing businesses, I'm skeptical of that idea as well. And we would have to probably charge for the loss of, for the use of that space for a business in a prime location in Camden. We'd have to charge $8,000 or $10,000, I would think, per summer to make it worthwhile to the town of Camden. Anyway, that's the thoughts that I go through on a project which was brand new to me on Tuesday night.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you. That was our last question. You have all done a wonderful job. You've kept the tone very civil and respectful and answered all our questions. Thank you very much. We wish you all good luck. And a big thanks to Linda and the Penn Bay Pilot. And she has something else to say, but first we'll clap for you.
We were going to allow a couple of minutes to let them, if they had any concluding thoughts, you may not, but if you do, let's keep it at 1 minute. But
All right. After we clap for you, then you can, no, a concluding thought? How about a 5-word concluding thought? Okay, who am I going to pick on this time? Ken, you go first. 5-word
Sure.
concluding
Listening,
thought.
that's my one word, listening. That's my goal in serving the town of Camden. I would like to think that I have capacity for listening, and I'm looking forward to speaking with everybody at some point in the future. And thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Very important skill. That's great. Sophie.
I'm going to use Ken's 5 words and then add mine. I just love serving on the board. It has its ups and downs, but I just love the fact that I meet so many people. I get exposed to really new topics that I'm not aware of, new ideas. And I really, overall, when I look at my last 3 years, yes, there's been some frustrating moments, but will I do it again? Hell yes. I just love doing it.
Thank you. Susan.
It would be an honor to serve you all.
Thank you. I think that was 5, actually. Stephanie.
Community, collaboration, listening, tradition, family values.
Okay, well, thank you all. We really appreciate it. Good job tonight. Excellent. Thank you, Linda. My pleasure.